Everybody shut up and action. Dude, let's talk about Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse, the sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. This movie was absolutely amazing. So Miles already knows about the multiverse's existence. We saw that back in Into the Spiderverse, and in this movie, he discovers the existence of the Spiderverse, which is essentially the grouping of a bunch of Spider-Men to protect the very fabric of the multiverse. You could say that the Spider-Man are the defenders of the multiverse! But now there's a huge threat that the Spider Society must face. I mean, like, we're talking about a multiverse here, we gotta have a villain. We gotta have a villain that is threatening the entire multiverse, of course. And while this villain is no joke, there's an entire different difficulty in facing this threat, with the varying views, morals, and ethics facing each Spider-Man in facing this threat. And of course, this is gonna lead to a lot of drama leading to defending the multiverse. This movie is amazing, just as every Spider-Man movie is, and clocking in at about 2.5 hours long, this movie is an absolute blast to watch on the big screen. The animation style is beautiful. Once again, right, like what Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse, the animation style, it's not particularly my favorite at the beginning of the movie, but then it continues to grow on me and I absolutely love it. So I will say the animation was beautiful, I loved it. And the character of Miles, the character of all the various Spider-Mans we've introduced in this movie. Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Gwen, she returns. There are so many more Spider-Man just other than those three that are introduced, and you fall in love with all of them. There are plenty of moments in this movie where you fall in love with every character, you hate every character. It's an entire swirl of emotions facing every character, and that's why you love each and every single one of them. In this movie, we're introduced to a new villain we haven't seen before called the Spot. He is a threat to the entire universe. He is another broken villain. Like all the villains nowadays, they're all broken characters, and that's no reason to hate on him. He is a great villain, changing from some sort of villain of the week. It's an episodal villain. He's not a big deal. Catch him, arrest him, toss him in jail. He's done. No more screen time for him. He evolves. He takes huge offense. It's 2023. You call me villain of the week? Hell no, son! I'm gonna become the biggest nightmare of your dreams. And yeah, that's what he becomes. He becomes a huge threat facing the entire multiverse, threatening the entire multiverse to a massive degree. And everything going on in this movie is kind of pushing him aside. While he may be an amazing villain, he does have his moments in this movie, but for the majority chunk of the movie, when you look back at it, he's more sidelined as a villain progressing forward this movie's sequel and the third movie in this entire Into the Spider-Verse trilogy. And while he may be sidelined, this movie's focus is character development. It spends 2.5 hours developing characters, developing Miles, developing Gwen, developing Miguel O'Hara, developing all these other Spider characters you're seeing in this movie. And while in theory, or not even in theory, like you just think about, oh, this is a movie about character development, 2.5 hours of just character development, that does not sound good at all. But somehow, this movie has you addicted to the screen for the full runtime. Like, right now, if you were to tell me that you combine Into the Across the Spiderverse and Beyond the Spiderverse, which is going to be the third film in this franchise, I would sit through 5 hours just to watch this movie and be in utter awe of what we just saw in this movie. I mean, I'm not going to say like this movie is absolutely beautiful, leaving you with a satisfying ending, because the biggest flaw with this movie is the ending. But we'll get to that in a minute. But the entire movie is built on character development while introducing a whole ton of action and battles and entire morals and ethics, which is essentially the story of Spider-Man, a battle of ethics. And while the typical Spider-Man is the story of responsibility, Miles' story here, it does touch on responsibility. All Spider-Man movies will. But it's also more along the lines of self-identity and who you are. We're all questioning who we are, and that's just a way for us to connect to the movie. But just focusing on the movie, we're just in awe of this character, all the difficulties he's facing as Spider-Man, and with his inner self-conflict with his family. He understands them completely, where they're coming from. He understands where he's coming from. He's not your typical hero going like, they just don't understand me, man. He has his understanding of everything around him, and he's just trying to figure out who he is, who Spider-Man is. And from the trailer, everyone's telling him, this is how things go. And he's the type of character that's going, nah, I'm gonna make my own story. It feels like it's a typical sort of storyline and everything is predictable, but it's not. Like, it's a guy who doesn't want to accept things that will happen and wants to change them. And it's just a heartbreaking story, because we know how everything goes for Spider-Man. While it may seem predictable, isn't really predictable at all, and it really brings a level of excitement watching this character develop, seeing their change, seeing everyone's morals and ethics and perspectives on this entire threat situation and how to deal with it appear, how they tangle themselves in this situation and how everything progresses. Everything about this movie, from the narrative and story-wise, is absolutely captivating, and it's a brilliant watch. If you want to talk more on the aspect of technicalities, animation, beautiful. Pacing, beautiful. Cinematics in this animation, gorgeous. You could take a ton of scenes, pluck a scene out, it'll make a gorgeous wallpaper. It's just a gorgeous poster. You can make a mural out of any image and it will be absolutely gorgeous. The soundtrack of this movie is more of a depressing sort of tone when you compare it to Into the Spiderverse, but it is absolutely beautiful. Turn it on at night and just vibe in peace. Holy crap, Metro Booming and all the other artists for this soundtrack popped off. It is absolutely brilliant. I've been listening to it on repeat, especially the song called Self Love. I am in love with it. I have listened to it over 100 times by now. And while this movie may be beautiful, it clocks in at 2.5 hours long, and at the end of the movie, this is the biggest flaw, I will tell you, you feel you're about to hit the climax. If you consider this as a 3-act film, while you're in the second act, approaching the climax, you are finally able to see the big climax. We've had plenty of action and development in Act 1 and the beginning of Act 2, and now we're approaching the climax, and suddenly you understand exactly what's happening. There's a build up, cliffhanger. Like, I mean, it's the most unsatisfying end you've had in a movie. Like, if you want to compare this to Dune and Fast X, they both have the same issues. It's all character development or just story building, a sort of prologue or introduction of the story, and then they'll bring in all the action, the hype, and interesting sequences and parts of the narrative that we're looking forward to in the second film. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that in Fast X and in Dune, they're both interesting movies in their own right, but Dune had terrible pacing. The first movie, while it was beautiful, it was just a tiring watch. If you want to watch Fast X, it was a fun watch, but it leaves you on a cliffhanger that leaves you with an unsatisfying ending. They don't feel complete in a singular movie and don't really make for an amazing film on their own. The same thing happens with this movie. While this movie is better by leaps and bounds than the other two movies in this first act, like, this movie was actually captivating. The first act of the movie was beautiful. The character development, the narrative building, world building, story building, multiverse building. It's all beautiful and it's an interesting watch, and it does make for a good movie, but it doesn't feel like a complete movie on its own. It feels like someone introduced you to the movie or read the first chapter or first few chapters of a book and then left it completely empty, like, oh, I'm tired to complete it, so I'll just go work on it later. And it just makes for an unsatisfying watch because you're left hanging at a cliffhanger, and it's not like a cliffhanger like in Infinity War and Endgame, where Infinity War and Endgame on their own right are complete movies. You could watch one without the other and have a complete beautiful story. But while they may be complete stories, this movie, they still leave you at a huge cliffhanger, leading to what will happen next. How will our heroes face this after this entire issue? Here, we're just being left at a cliffhanger, and at this cliffhanger, we're just approaching the climax of the story, where we're about to see some of the more satisfying things that the entire film has been building up to. So it just feels like a huge disappointment at the end, leading up to another year of waiting for the second movie. In all honesty, I think it would have been much better if we waited for Beyond the Spider-Verse in its entirety. I wouldn't mind waiting another year if we've waited this long just to get both movies together. I would not mind. And from the audience's vibe, I do not think a single person would mind waiting. I mean, obviously the wait will be painful, but if we wouldn't, after waiting 4 years, I don't think anyone would mind waiting another year just to get both movies together. And I do not think a single person would mind sitting through a 5-hour movie. At the end of those 2.5 hours, I was just starstruck. I would have been gladly waiting for a 5-hour movie. I would have gladly watched through the 5-hour movie. In all honesty, if they're worried about people pissing their pants, people can wear a diaper. If you don't want people wearing diapers in the theater and making it all smelly, hell, toss in an intermission. No one will be mad. Turn it into a Bollywood movie with an intermission in there. People will go take a break in the restroom, come right back, and be starstruck by the second half of the movie. Just this cliffhanger just was not it. It made for a terrible ending, to be honest. And that is honestly one of the biggest things. There are plenty of questions and a couple of plot holes which leaves you questioning some things. There are plenty of Easter eggs referencing other Spider-Man films, the MCU in its entirety, but there are a couple of plot holes as well here and there. And there's a lot to think about. If you want to look at the foreshadowing from Into the Spider-Verse, you can think back on that and you can be starstruck by just how much planning has gone into this movie. There's just a lot going on, a lot of character development. You can look on any of these characters and try to analyze it. It is beautiful. This entire narrative is beautiful. Everything about this movie is beautiful. It's right. I rate this movie a 90%. It is an absolute bop, a must-watch movie this year. I loved it. I know you will too. Peace.